"Okay," my mother said. "Okay. Blue and white lights, one bush, and one bush only. You hear me? Blue and white, one bush." I'd heard her, but I was already outside searching for the perfect specimen, the one that looked most like a tree. Blue and white, Hanukkah colors, one bush. Yeah, I'd heard her, but it didn't matter. The main thing was she'd relented. My badgering and tears had finally worked. Hooray! No longer would our house go dark. No longer would it be the black hole in a glittering sky. We too would be merry. We too would be bright. We too would belong. We moved to Whittier when I was 7. Yes, that Whittier. Hometown of Richard M. Nixon. Old Tricky Dick. The city was just east of LA, but had more in common with then staunchly conservative Orange County. Indeed, Whittier was about as right-wing as it got. And that was ironic given that its roots were Quaker, a religion persecuted for its pacifism and belief in racial and gender equality. I didn't care about any of that back then, of course. I just wanted to be like everybody else, which, until about age 16, meant attempting to erase my identity. We relocated to Whittier from the nearby town of La Mirada because my father was setting up a medical practice there. I was along for the ride, which was bumpy from the start. Take our house, a modified ranch with a massive stone fireplace and an avocado grove in the half-acre backyard. It was an anomaly in our neighborhood of Plan 1, 2, and 3 tract homes. Indeed, our house had a different builder entirely, disrupting the homogeneity. The street on which the house sat contributed to this effect. It was a long cul-de-sac that curved halfway around. We were on the elbow, where the street changed names from Malou to the more ethnic De Vista, an oddity in itself. The signpost stood in our ivy, which lent us a unique stature, but also a test tube sort of feel. Why was our house not included in the tract? Did its diamond shape ruin the rectangular pattern? Was there something alien in the soil? The test had really begun then, although we didn't know it. How would a Jewish, politically democratic family fare in an all-white Christian Republican neighborhood? Let's show them the weird house, the realtor may have thought, and see. And we took the bait, not realizing that our location would mark us, that our beliefs would single us out, that we would be subject to scrutiny and suspicion. Now, the truth was, I got along pretty well with the neighborhood kids, and there were a lot of them. Baby boomers in the making. Back then, we'd wave goodbye to our parents in the morning and be gone until dinner. There was a gully at the end of a nearby street that became our go-to place. It was just dirt and dried out brush, but to us it was paradise. And in that innocent space, in that Eden, I was one of the gang. We were all related, all little Adams and Eves, before the fall. Like other kids, we also put on talent shows, had rope jumping contests, and relay matches. In the spring, it was softball. And it just so happened that the manhole cover, which served as home plate, was directly in front of our house. That made us special in a good way. After those games, everyone hung out on our family's lawn as if it were no different than theirs. Nobody noticed the shape or worried about the soil then. On those days, we were teammates, equal, friends in the Quaker sense. In the summer, we played every day. Otherwise, it was mostly on Saturdays, the Jewish Sabbath. Thank God my family didn't formally celebrate. No doubt in part because they feared my rebellion. Thus, my friends had no clue, and I lived with the illusion that my bond with them was unbreakable. Their Sabbath, however, was sacred. Sundays were quieter, everyone went to church while we had brunch. Bagels and lox, before most people even knew what a bagel was, when they couldn't have distinguished one from a donut. It helped that my family wasn't religious, except on the Jewish New Year, which always fell on the first few days of school. Most of the time I could blend in, but on that holiday, my mother suddenly became Orthodox. No one in the family spoke Hebrew, and the only Yiddish we knew were obscenities. But on the New Year, I was forced to attend temple, missing those crucial first days of school when social connections are revived. It didn't help that the temple was directly across from one of the schools either. Try slinking down in the back car seat with your brother laughing and trying to pick you back up. As this horrid convergence approached, I'd sulk and brood and become downright despairing. To me, this was blatantly unfair, and there was shame in it. So when I returned to school, I'd lie, telling my friends I'd been sick. You're always sick at the beginning of school, Ona. I know, it's funny, huh? But Christmas, oy vey Christmas. That was another story. Forget Tiny Tim, my agony was worse. Every year I had to fabricate a tale about why my friends could not come into the house. I mean, I didn't have to, but I did, because in my mind, a tinsel Star of David was no substitute for a fragrant 8-foot gleaming tree. To me, our symbol was synonymous with evil or a hammer and sickle. At least that's the message I'd imbibed, the one that every now and again would slip off of our neighbors' tongues. I was 10 the year my mother agreed to the lights. It was as if I had been forgiven my sins, like the supposed killing of Christ, an act for which my best friend told me I'd be going to hell. My father did not own a screwdriver, but he somehow managed to string the bulbs perfectly, just like the other fathers with garages full of tools. To this day, I cannot recall greater bliss. And that night, when the lights clicked on, they lit my spirit as much as the yard. Not even the burning bush would have had such power. Even my mom said the lights were pretty, seeming to question why she'd been so resistant. True, she wasn't devout, but she'd always thought of herself as a link in a chain, and she honored that role by keeping certain things sacred. Had she lived in Germany, she might very well have perished. Holding her ground at Christmas seemed a small price to pay for that luck. Still, that was then. The bush was illuminated and she hadn't been punished. They were Hanukkah colors after all, and her daughter was happy. The next morning, the glow lingered. I dressed and finished the instant breakfast I usually poured down the drain. For once, it tasted like a milkshake instead of medicine. But I was still young then, young and naive. I had yet to read Frankenstein or see the movie The Brain That Wouldn't Die. I didn't yet know that the monster we thought was dead had simply changed forms. I ran outside to play, glancing at the bush. I blinked. Something was wrong with my vision. I blinked again. No change. The blue and white bulbs were gone. In their place, red and green. Red and green. I forced down the fake chocolate liquid that had risen in my throat and touched the lights to make sure. Was I dreaming? Had Moses done it? If he could part the sea, Red Sea, anything was possible. But why would he? Maybe I was hysterical. Like that patient of my dad's who only thought she was blind. Hysterical. But I wasn't laughing. And I was awake. Awake enough to know that this wasn't an illusion. My mother's reaction was something I'll never forget. She grew deathly quiet, taking in the scene with a shattered but steely gaze. It was as if someone had written "kike" on our house, as if she were a link or two back in that chain, Germany, Spain, wherever her people had suffered. She knew I too was suffering, but was steadfast in her resolve. Never again, she said. Never again. And we never did headlights again, nor did we discover the culprit, although we had a few ideas. That holiday season was ruined for me, more tortured than usual. I hunkered down, dreading encounters with my neighbors, searching each face for a sly, knowing grin. I waited impatiently for school to resume, to put our own version of Kristallnacht behind me. But I couldn't, and that was a blessing. I eventually outgrew my self-loathing, at least on that score. I made Jewish friends, went to Israel, and embraced my heritage. I carved my own link, secular, cultural, but permanently soldered to the chain. And things have evolved. Whittier has become more Davista than Malou. My parents are in the same house, still alive, but their neighbors are mostly Hispanic and Democrats. Many of the signs on Whittier Boulevard where we cruise as teenagers are bilingual. There still aren't a lot of Jews in the area, but attitudes have changed. I married a non-practicing Catholic from Tennessee who didn't even think Jews had horns. Like many modern families, we mix traditions, decorate a Christmas tree with Star of David cookies. We are open to change and enlightened. Today, things are different. Or are they? Not too long ago, I was at a holiday party around the corner and relayed this very story. People shook their heads quaintly as if hearing about a contagion before the discovery of soap. But the next night, my husband called me outside. "You're not going to believe this," he said. He pointed to the fence where days before he had hung several strings of blue and white lights. Someone had pulled one bulb out of each string, making the display go dark. Our entire display had gone dark. Thank you.
That is VAMP first timer, Ona Russell.